Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another install. So today, you can see that something's about to happen to the STI, and you're probably wondering what in the heck is going on. Well, guess what? Stay tuned. Okay, so long story short, I just want to basically jump into the flared wheel well areas and just get those finished up. I really hate when I start a project and then I don't finish it. So that's really what I did was I started to finish that wheel well and whatnot. I got it all flared, got it all cleared, but I never trimmed it up. And the reason why I didn't trim it up is because it needed to be plug welded together. Because once you over accentuate all that steel further up and in, those OEM pinch welds that were there and those those plug welds that were there will now be part of the steel that I will be cutting off. So in that essence, what's going to hold the steel together once I trim it? So what I had to do was I had to get in there and drill out all of the plug welds. And as you can see right here, this is pretty self-explanatory. You're just going to want to drill out just the top layer and leave the back layer, the backer, still there, so that you can weld into it just like a factory OEM stature. I like to build these exactly the way they are from the factory. And if per se like another mechanic or auto body man needs to get in there 10 years down the road when it's rotted or something, then he could just drill out the spot welds that I put in, and it's a pretty simple repair. And so with that said, I'm not going to talk your head off. We'll just get into what's needed now. And that's why everything's all covered up. As you can see in the background there, everything is ready to go. I got to clean some steel and, just clean the area up, run a little cookie over it. And then I can start doing some plug welds. All right, so let's bring you up to speed. So I've already gone ahead and I've cleaned this edge. Turn on the light. There you go. Everything's ready to be welded and everything has already been pre-drilled. I already feathered out all of the flaking paint from the manipulated steel, and now we're ready to start welding. Before you start welding, make sure you disconnect the battery or spend the money and get yourself a surge protector like this. These are great. Light comes on, you're protected. Pretty easy. They're not cheap, so I'm not trying to sell you on that. Make sure everything is covered with fire protection welding blankets. Shroud everything off for any kind of sparks, any kind of hot metal and whatnot. We still got the Bucky elastic side skirts on here, so that's why all the extra protection is here. There are some Brembys underneath there, obviously, because this is an STI, so it's got Brembo brakes. So those are very expensive. We're going to cover those up. I'm sure he doesn't want hot slag sitting in his powder coating. And make sure the rear bumper is completely covered up good. I've probably got maybe 10 layers of tape here in between, here. This way I didn't have to drop down the bumper. I just went the extra mile and put a bunch of tape on there to protect it. You can obviously lower the bumper, but this just saves time because all we're trying to do here is clean it up. He's taking it to a body shop. I'm not, doing any body work, but I did help by feathering a lot of this stuff out, mainly for the sheer fact I want to, obviously do the plug welds here. But I want to put some primer on this before he comes gets it because I don't want to send it down the road. Even though it had some flaking paint, I'm not going to send something like this down the road with some bare steel or any kind of steel exposed. So we'll make sure that this is at least primed and sealed before we send it down the road. He also had some rust underneath there because he had rolled the fenders before he had come here, and the roller had stretched it out so far that it did a little bit of damage on the inside of the quarter panel, so it was doing some rusting. So I wanted to clean it up also as well now, and just get to it and just make sure it was clean. So now I'm gonna go ahead. Let's melt some metal. And I also might add real quick that I ended up putting a little bit of a crease in here. You can't see it now, especially that I've cleaned the surface Nah, you really can't see it. So I'm going to go ahead and unispot that out, and then I'll bring that out because, I mean, I caused that damage when I was rolling this in. It wanted to have a little crease here, so I'm going to go ahead and pull that out, do the metal work and whatnot so that his body guy doesn't have to worry about that, and he doesn't have to pay the body man to fix it as well for me doing that to him. So, I mean, obviously, if you do something or you damage something, fix it. Why you tell me I'm on fire? Yeah, I know. Foam, not the best to lay on because it's pretty flammable, but man, it's pretty soft. Wasn't thinking. Okay, back to work. All right, so I got it all grinded out. Everything looks nice and flush now. Got all the welds gone. That way it's nice and smooth. Now I can trim this up and know that it actually will stay together. So now I struck a new line for the inside inner lip. I'm going to go ahead and trim the excess steel off. You can see the overhang, what doesn't need to be there. All right, everything's all trimmed up now. Now I'm just going to go inside on this inner edge and sand that down nice and smooth. And then I can actually massage it up a little bit more and then throw some seam sealer on this edge. So if anybody runs in there with their fingers, they're not going to cut it off, etc. And then I'll be able to put this in some primer and be done with it. All right, so I went ahead and unispotted that crease, got all of that out, cut all the studs off, unispotter gun, etc. Did the actual metal work itself. I've already grinded down the other stud that was here. You can kind of see it right there, but it's all feathered out. You get the idea how easily they are to be, you know, undone and whatnot. So there's no damage. The old school method was you drilled a hole and you screwed in a threaded stud. You pulled the dent panel through that, and then you had to weld up that hole after and then grind all that down. Now they use unispotters or studs. This is your weldable stud that goes right in your gun. This is the tip that actually gets welded to the actual body surface itself, and then you pull off of that with a unispotter puller. You know, and this pretty easy. You just turn the end. That's what tightens down on the stud. And then it's a slide hammer. Pretty simple. All right, so I got the inside lip all sanded down with the 180 grits so that it's all smooth, so that nobody cuts themselves on it. And now it's time to start with a little bit of body work that I've got here. I've got everything all pulled out, and then I went over it real quick with some 180 grit so that the surface is prepped for a little bit of icing, and then I'll just deck that flat, put everything in primer, and everything will be all sealed up. All right, so I went ahead and applied the polyester glaze all the way across. Everything looks pretty uniform. I went ahead and did the inside lip also as well so that the application of the primer was a lot better. I'm going to go ahead and just sand all this out, and basically when I'm done with it, it'll be pretty transparent, really thin, and not have to worry about it. Other than that, we'll be able to get it in primer pretty soon. All right, so it's the next day, and I decided that I think I'm going to work on the other side now. now that that's all ready to go, and then that way I can just sand out both sides at the same time. So it's time to flare this out. I've already got it up on jack stands. It's been on them. So I'm just going to pull this tire off, and then I'll start straightening out everything as far as this inner lip and whatnot. We're going to start extending all that back down, pulling all that back down, and then straightening all of this surface, all of this steel. I mean, you can see all this lip here. We're going to pull all that out. Everything's going to get dollied nice and flat. And then we're going to re-manipulate right on that line, because that is going to be the new desired wheel arc that we're going to, basically going to want to achieve. That way we can throw the flare up on there. And that big boy sitting over there up against the door here, an 11-inch wide. It's a really nice wet sport, as you can see. So they got to be able to fit, they got to be able to tuck and whatnot. So with some clearance, he was already having that issue. It's just the stock offset on these tires. So I can only imagine what it would be like with those. So with that said, time to manipulate some metal. Over here is basically just the standard tools of what you're going to need. You are not that strong in your fingers. You're not going to be able to pull all that stuff out. So you're going to need some kind of tool to be able to manipulate the steel itself. So I'm going to grab these duck bills. That's what these are. I like these. These are really good. Now, the more you have, the easier this job's going to be, but you only really need one. They're not that cheap, and I think they're like anywhere between 25 and 40 bucks, depending on who you get them from as a supplier. But generally, what you're going to do is just pinch the inside of this steel here and just start folding slowly, as slow as you can. The more you have, the more you can strap on there. Boom, 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 boom. It's like pulling levers. Ha, ha, ha. Just, real slow and whatnot. And then come on back, start pulling levers all the way back, nice and slow, and then back, nice and slow. And before you know it, you've got it all out enough. I mean, it's going to look crinkled. It's, that's all stretched metal. So it is fine. Totally fine. You just want to plane it all nice and flat. Majority of it is going to get trimmed off anyways. So it's just time to work it. All right, so I went ahead and just grabbed one more duck bill to make it a little easier for myself, and I've got them all 4 clamped on the inside lip. Now, these were already pre-rolled with a roller off of the hub. I'm sure you guys have seen those and whatnot, and they roll on the inside lip. So it took a little bit for me to manipulate everything down to get it to where it was an OEM lip. So that way we can start where you would normally. So with that said, what we're going to do is go ahead and start manipulating a little bit of steel. And you see, you just kind of give it a little pull. It's going to be ugly at first, but after that, it gets a lot better. And then we're just going to disconnect these real quick, reposition them in between each of these voids, and then do the same thing. And then just connect them and then put them back where they are. Start pulling them a little bit further, and then so on and so forth until all of this is flat. So let's just go ahead and skip ahead. I guess I should mention that if you only do have one duck bill, and I'm trying to talk over my heater in the background, sorry about that, it's a cold day today, but go ahead and start from here and then work your way right over. You can come in, clamp, and then just work right on that ledge, clamp that. Just a little bit at a time until you can slowly manipulate it. I tend to have a lot more tools than others, but I've been doing this for a long time. So I probably should just show you in a method how to do it if you only had one. Just slowly work all this out and then work your way back where you just started. You get the point. I'm going to go ahead and work this all throughout, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so I have pretty much everything all manipulated out as far as I like with the duck bills, at least as much as they'll allow me to go. And now it's time to grab that hammer and dolly And what you're going to want to do is put your dolly. I like using an actual hammerhead. I just cut off the actual handle itself. This is probably my favorite dolly just because it's really heavy. And I know that the mass of the hammer traveling through will actually, the dolly itself will serve as a really good backer because it's heavier than the dolly itself. So also, these are usually the standard dollies. These are fine, obviously. I just tend to use the, I don't know why, I just tend to grab it a lot, but you can obviously use just any kind of standard dolly as a good backer and whatnot, anything that's hard and flat, etc. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do is dolly this flat, and then we'll see where we are. Also, this is a good opportune time to go ahead and remove all of the OEM seam seal. Now you're going to go ahead, after we trim all this off, we will reapply this seam sealer at the end so that nothing gets into the seam itself. We're going to go ahead and weld up new pinch weld holes, all new plug welds, all the way down through, because once you do manipulate this far in, there's going to be so much stick out that you will have to trim and cut off, which will be majority of these plug welds. So you don't want any separation of the steel later on. So that's what we're going to do and prepare for later on. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and pound some of this steel flat. Okay, so you can already see that it is just getting wonky. It wants to go everywhere. It's doing this in and out and whatnot of the steel. That's perfectly fine. Let it do what it's got to do. It's got to go somewhere. All of that has been pre-stretched in order to fold in and whatnot. So you're going to have it for later. We're going to actually have to stretch this a lot more because we still have that flat surface here that still has to fold up and in. So with that said, let's get back to beating some steel. Probably a little loud, I'm sorry. And that is about as flat as it's going to let me because it just wants to crown with a bunch of high spots, mainly because we put a lot of stress on this. So right now I'm just going to take the time to get rid of all of this seam sealer. It's already pretty much loosened up, especially because we just manipulated the crap out of this steel. Beating on it like this, it's separated the bond. Alright, so I'm going to grab duck build now. Now it's the magic time. Make sure you got yourself a good pair, something that's going to spring back on you and not lock up. And then basically what I like to do is, rather than have it like this, I'll pull it out, that way I have a little bit more of momentum. So we'll start with the edge. It doesn't matter if you start here, it doesn't matter if you start here. I'm going to strike right on the line. Obviously this is a round arc, and that's straight. There's not going to be an arc, so you just want to stay point to point on the actual line itself. And then keeping the face here, so you want to kind of pull this way while still turning the lip in, because you want to keep this face in the same vicinity that it's in. So actually, hold on, let me zoom in, the way you guys can get a better idea. There we go, that's a lot better. So you can see point to point is on, there's a little bit of overhang. So we're gonna go ahead And I'm going to hold pressure on the inside here so it doesn't want to, curl this thing in. And then I'm just going to fold. That's it. Just give it a little bit of memory. And then I'm going to come in at not where I stopped at. That's now the middle point of the actual duckbill itself. You're going to come in right there. You're just going to come in every midsection basically and just slowly work this line. Now you guys see, we're not doing any pie cuts here. We're not cutting anything. The only thing that you're going to have to cut is the trim off after. Don't pie cut stuff, guys. That's bad. All right. Just a little bit of manipulation. Not too much. Come in at the halfway point, point to point. Just a little bit. It's not easy. You're going to need a little bit of muscle to do so. But if you go slow, you'll be fine. You can already see the shape is already starting to take place. It'll start looking more like a pan on the inside now. This is called metal manipulation. We're just manipulating the metal itself to be in the shape that we want it. This is literally what they did from the factory. They took a piece of flat metal and they manipulated it with usually a machine press and with force. Not as slow of a process as we're doing now, obviously. But it can absolutely be done right in your driveway, in your home garage, anywhere you desire, outside. Obviously you guys can see there's some paint popping and whatnot. There is going to have to be some paint work after, but that's really with any kind of huge modification like this, you're going to have paint work usually. Slowly but surely tighten this grip up a little bit. Okay. This is the hard part. So usually because we have all this pressure, it's going to want to pull this corner in wicked, and because of that it'll dimple the steel out, which is why I pulled the bumper out, because it wants to dig into the urethane itself. After, you're going to have to go in and dolly that steel after you manipulate everything. So let that steel poke out. Probably, again, I'm going to show you what it looks like. So this is where we're at now. You can see everything is starting to dish in and get that pan effect. Again, guys, no cuts. We are putting this on the desired area, and you can go much higher if you wanted to. I mean, if you've got a flatter panel versus this is where the body line is, that's where the top of our flare is going to be. So I can't go much higher. This is the highest clearance we can get, but you guys can absolutely go much higher. That metal wheel well comes right up on the inside. If you have any, obstructions on the inside with the wheel well, normally most of the times you can pound them flat and you can manipulate. So what I was mean by the steel, you can see the end, it's starting to dimple out. Normally that would have a huge impression here into the urethane on the bumper. just let it manipulate, let it push out, because after we get this all where we want it and we have all the memory, and we can just go in there and dolly that little bit inside here, nice and flat. Real easy. And then it'll have memory. It'll all be done. Okay, so now I've went ahead and I've manipulated everything as far as I physically can push it with my, my hands, my own physical strength. And I'm whooped. You're never going to be able to push all that and form fit all of that by hand. Only for the sheer fact you're not strong enough. You're not a machine. That's how majority of everything here has been done, was all machine formed and machine fit. So, with that said, I'm going to have to teach you all the tips and tricks in order to get this further along, because there is a lot of pressure here now, enough to where if you start even torquing here, it's going to start pulling down here. Same and vice versa. You start torquing here, it's just going to want to go somewhere else. That's how pressure works on steel. If you apply it in one spot, it's going to have to go in others, and that's how they kind of manipulate the steel so that in accidents and whatnot, it crumbles and disperses and keeps you safe on the inside. That's why these things are made like Pepsi cans now, because they want them to crumple up. That's actually a good thing, guys. It's safety. So with that said, these are pretty easy to manipulate as long as you know the proper steps. So again, we are as far as we can go with the duckbills, enough to where if we start manipulating, and I'll show you here in this corner, if I go to turn this, it just wants to curl this face here, which I don't want curled. I want this to come nice and flush with this bumper when that mates up in that point, because that's the new line. I still want it to start there off of that point. So if I keep doing this, it's going to now put a crease right here in this area, and I don't want that there. So we're going to pull this out to where I do want it. And because we know that we have a lot of stress here, we're going to de-stress it by stretching the metal out. And the only way that you're going to be able to stretch it out is by force. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and we're going to hold it where we want that corner to be. And just to really check, you can put the bumper back and just hold it in place. So that's where that's got to go. And then we're going to stretch it. And now I don't tend to hit on the flat. I'll curl the hammer just a little bit. So I'm actually hitting on the edge every single time and I'm dimpling it. And that's perfectly fine. I actually want to manipulate this more by putting dimples in it and more stretch points. See, I can put more of a stretch on a pinpoint than I can on a flat surface. It takes longer to disperse the stretch throughout a flat surface. But if I dimple it, that puts a big dimple in a high spot there that's all been stretched. And then I can go in and manipulate it all flat, and it's a lot easier to disperse the stretched point, the stretched high point, than it was to stress it all out flat. So with that said, hold this here. Hopefully that made sense to you. Put that there, and just kind of look at that huge difference. Look at that, it's already a big difference by coming in. You can apply a lot more pressure on the side of the hammer. So there's different ways and techniques of how to actually use your tools. So make sure that you basically use them in the best effective manner that you can, and know that there are probably 10 to 15 different ways of how to use a pair of pliers. All right, so I'm going to hold this here and continue to stretch this all the way without putting this where I want it to be. The hammer at this point in time is going to be your best friend. Slowly back and forth, you can get the idea. Now, it probably looks pretty good from this camera angle, but from this one, not so much. You can see that we want the line to be up here versus the bottom of that panel is still down here. You can see kind of the panning now. It's got a lot more to go, a lot further that needs to be manipulated so that we can bring this inside shelf further up. It takes time. You're going to get tired. It is what it is. So be prepared. Go slow. The faster you go, obviously, the more damage you're probably going to cause. Just take your time, and eventually you will get that line that you want to achieve, and you'll be happy. I promise. No cuts. No pie cuts. Sorry, guys. I am out of breath on a lot of this. It's a lot of work. Especially I'm trying to speed through this so that I can try and get this upload finished today and also get a pretty good, decent amount of work done today. This right here takes a long time. The other wheel well took me from start to finish between everything. It was all about 4 hours between all the drilling, the tapping, and the manipulation. So be prepared. It's going to be about half a day before this is all done and you can put your flares back on them. If you're looking to do both sides, it's going to take you all day to do this. It's about 8 hours of just going right to town, manipulating the metal, and then eventually, going in there and replug welding. You're going to need a welder in order to do this the right way. There are other methods of doing this. If you wanted to do it in a different way, I guess you could probably drill holes and then do rivets in there to keep the steel together. That would probably be an easy, cheap method if you don't have a welder. And then what's really good about that is you can bring it to any welder, any guy who has a welder, and he can literally pop the caps of the rivets off, pop all those rivets out very easily. Because if anybody tells you that, it's hard to get rivets off, talking out their butt. So rivet that steel back together. If you don't have a welder, guys, and bring it to a guy who has a welder, and he'll easily weld all of those holes completely solid, steel to steel, and then you'll have it done correct. So don't freak out when you're watching this saying, man, I can't even do it this way because I don't even have a welder. It's not fair. I know how it is. I was once there. I didn't have these tools, so I get it. So with that said, yeah. It's time to manipulate some more steel. Shit. Gotta love when the camera falls. All right, so after hours of beating on it and manipulating it, I've got it to the desired height and shape that we were looking for. And you can see all of the drastic overhang, and obviously we're going to have to, only need about this much of it, because that's the only, stock width, etc. We'll go ahead and we'll carry that throughout and whatnot. Also, when you look at this, let me turn the light on. You can see a lot of these pinch welds here are going to be part of the strip that we actually cut off and trim off. And because of that, that's the reason why we're going to have to go around and drill all of the new plug welds, all the new holes and whatnot. So you're just going to drill just this top layer of sheet metal and then leave the backside because that's what you're going to weld into. It's pretty easy. Obviously I'll explain it more when we get to there. So now I'm taking a break from that. I'm going to start working on the actual fender liners themselves. I've just taken some baseboard, some poster board, and just doing some rough templates and whatnot. I've got this template here, this shape, all the way throughout, and then it'll carry on the backside and be able to bolt on that inside edge here, and then this will fit on the inside of the fender. I'll be able to secure some hardware up and throughout. But at least I got this one piece trimmed up perfectly all throughout. And then now it's time to start on the front section and then finish this up and then go ahead and replicate on the other side.